Hi, Peter Bernstein here from the floor of the Austin Convention Center at IT Expo Austin 2012. I'm the senior editor of TMCnet, and we're talking virtual management and virtual machines and resource capacity with Alex Rosemblat, who is the marketing manager for what used to be VKernel and is now, as of this week, part of Dell, who is located that a ways, a couple of miles. So, welcome, and tell us a little bit about the marketplace and why this whole virtual. We all know about the trend toward virtualization, but let's talk about the problems that customers have and why you believe you guys have a great solution.
Sure, thanks, Peter. So, as you said, everything seems to be trending towards virtualization, and virtualization sounds good, and it is good, and it helps both provide agility as well as more efficiency to data centers. However, with that agility, there's a lot more complexity. You've got VMs sharing resources, they're sharing storage, CPU, memory, and there's also a lot of dynamism in these systems. So VMs can move around and kind of arrange themselves the way that they need to be completely automatically. When you look at an environment a couple of days later, everything might be in a different spot. You don't quite know where it is. And what we see with our customer base is after they get to that 50 to 100 VM level, that's kind of the breaking point.
Which, by the way, really isn't a lot.
And it doesn't take very much
And it doesn't take long to get there, right?
And actually, that's a very good point. Because it used to take days to get a server installed, to get the application onto the server, people were very careful and methodical with getting new applications up and running. With VMware or another hypervisor, it's just the click of a button. So it's almost like opening up Pandora's box for applications in the organization, and everyone knows it's easy, it takes the click of a button, everything's being used much more efficiently, and we often find our customers having 3 to 4 times the amount of applications 6 months after they virtualize than from what they had when they were just running physical servers.
Well, it's interesting because we saw some information at a couple of the sessions yesterday that there's this incredible acceleration of applications going into enterprises.
Yes.
Where people are talking about just in very specific app segments of 25 new apps being introduced within the next month or two, right?
Yeah.
And you're sitting there shaking your head going, that's going to put a lot of stress on these data centers, which means virtualization really had better work, and it better work seamlessly, and oh, by the way, it better expand pretty quickly as well, and I better know what's going on. So talk to me a little bit about, so when does your average customer come to you, and walk me through the process of what you help them with first, second, third?
Sure. So actually that dovetails very nicely into what you were saying. When you hit that 50 to 100 VM mark, you start to forget, oh yeah, I made that change to that VM over there. There's just too much happening. Things are moving around too quickly. You lose control of the environment. And when you lose control, you start using your resources inefficiently. You might not do updates or take a look at performance as often as you might. And all of a sudden you start getting end users or application owners calling with performance problems. Things are running slow. So you start having to troubleshoot, but you're not just troubleshooting that VM. That VM is sharing resources from the host with 10 to 20 other guys. And they're sharing resources from the storage area with possibly every VM in that environment. So you have to look at all these different interconnections to figure out what's going on. So we typically have a customer come to our website looking for help with performance problems or just not knowing how to plan for capacity and figure out how many more hosts they need to order. They download our software, which is Try and Buy, and it takes about 15 minutes to set up. And immediately after that setup, they're in our software that shows a list of every performance problem that is in that environment, and it tells you not just that there's a performance problem, but what's causing it, how to fix it, and for most performance problems, there's a button that you can click on, and it'll go right through and make the change that's necessary to fix the problem.
So let me back up a second. You said this gets installed in 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
And the average IT guy, very comfortable with the user interface, understands what they're looking at. It's a wizard.
If you, as an IT person, have ever deployed a virtual application in VMware, which for is a pretty standard thing to do.
I hate to use the terms virtually everybody, but
virtually everyone that works with this virtualization software has done that. Yeah.
So what are you seeing in the marketplace in terms of there's some issues, and I know this because I've done some webinars and things on this, between associating the network silo with the VMware silo and trying to get past all of the issues that revolve around there. Are you starting to see this in your practice as well, that more and more you're getting involved in the networking problems as well?
To a degree. I think that it really depends on how much bandwidth there is in the entire data center. What we've seen with network in particular is that there's tons and tons of bandwidth, even though the data center admins might not think so. They just got these really big amounts of capacity that they can run through the network, and because it's either being used or not being used, that leads a lot of open spaces. And we find networking problems to be relatively scarce unless you've got a really serious problem either at the hardware level or some VM that's doing something crazy.
Right, and that's inside, let's be clear, that's inside the data center, not any connectivity issues.
Inside the data center.
So
now there's one exception. If you use your network for your storage,
right.
Yes, that will often and very quickly lead to performance problems and slowness. However, when you get much larger and you start getting a lot of dynamic movement in those VMs, then network problems can spring up. So we have started seeing that in larger environments.
So the really interesting thing is this is a very important niche in the market. I mean, I know people don't like to talk about plumbing that often, but plumbing is important because eventually when I turn on the faucet, the water better run.
That's right.
So I guess it's no accident that Dell, who's got a little bit of an interest in the space, was interested in you guys. What do you think the next iteration of your product, of your service is going to be? Just out of curiosity.
Well, we're very new to Dell.
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly what's coming down the pipe down that way. But
you had a roadmap, and they must have been impressed with it. So.
Right. What I do know that we're looking to is to become more prescriptive.
Okay.
So we've been going down this direction. We want to get farther down there. There's two, I guess, ends of the spectrum for somebody that runs a VMware environment or any sort of virtualized environment. You have someone that's very new, and they basically picked up a book and started using it, to somebody that's an expert. For the person that's new, they don't really know what they're doing. They're still learning on the job. So we want to be prescriptive for those people and say, this is the way that you should set up your VMs. Here's what you should do now, and go ahead and do it, and you're going to have a good time, in your data center without any sort of performance problems to bother you. So that's one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the expert. And the expert only has so many hours in the day or so many hours in the week to spend. So they wish that they could clone themselves a couple of times over to be able to handle all the requests that come through. So being very prescriptive and setting some automation with that allows them to almost clone themselves with experts that have put this programming into our application, and it just happens automatically. So we're going more and more into the automation realm and basing all that off of advice that VM experts have come up with of how you should ideally configure and run your virtual environment to get optimal performance at the best possible cost.
Terrific. Well, I guess I can officially welcome you to Austin, because probably you'll be here a little bit more often. And wanted to thank you for stopping by, and have a great show.
All right. Thank you, Peter.